Hey, everybody. So good to be back here. I know I saw some faces yesterday. It's nice to see you again. For those who don't know me, Tim Carr, Oracle Advertising. Basically, we help advertisers better use the data they have and then access the data they need so that they can improve their advertising campaigns. And it's great to be here specifically at this event because so much of our business, the foundation of it is all built on retail data and working with various different retailers, hundreds of them, to help them accomplish their advertising objectives. So it's a great spot to be here. I'm here with John Giaquinto. I'm going to let him introduce himself. Please do not Google his name. If you do, he is not the John from across the river that may or may not have gotten into some trouble with the Gambino family. So it is not that John.
Either way, don't worry about it.
Yeah. He is a lovely man that I just met, and we just immediately hit it off and had some great conversations. And if he does not mention it, he has a side hustle in behavioral economics, which I think is a great combination when you think about loyalty, of understanding consumer behavior, and really that's what you're trying to do with loyalty programs. So John, quick intro.
Quick intro. What have you not said? I'm currently at Rite. I've been there about 7 months. I've broken some records and people have lost bets now that I've made 7 months. Those of you know Rite, in the news, recently filed for Chapter 11. I'm not going to shy away from that news. I actually knew what I was getting into, and there are some reasons for it, mostly character flaws on my part. But there's, it's a great challenge, and I think specifically a challenge for running a loyalty program and the way people usually run them, to make the loyalty program be part of that turnaround. So, but I've worked at other companies. I've worked for consultancies. Loyalty has become a bit of a specialty, but I started off in branding like most of you, and just fell into this sort of discipline now. So how's that for an intro?
That's fantastic.
It's mostly true.
I think you covered it, and I think you hit, sometimes you just have to hit the, hard ones dead on, and talk about like where you go forward. So why don't we start with that? Loyalty means a lot of things to a lot of different people. I'd love to hear your perspective specifically to what are you trying to accomplish with a loyalty program, and in the type of retailers that you were in today at a Rite Aid or a traditional CPG retailer that has a tremendous amount of data that you can put to use and harness, and very high frequent shopper rates. So what do you think of as the number one job that you're trying to do with the loyalty program?
Yeah, that's a big question. I'll try to answer it as best I can. I think I'll try to draw some contrast too. So first of all, loyalty, the way I see it, it's really, you can call it a lot of things, but that's such a powerful word, loyalty. And yet the promise of what loyalty means, and I think it's, colloquial word, it means retaining your customers. The way most people look at their loyalty program and judge its performance, they look at ROI, they look at short-term campaigns. None of that has anything to do with what we intuitively think of as loyalty. Loyalty is long-term. Loyalty is more about retaining customers, less about getting them to buy more. I think I approach loyalty more in the sense of the word in the English language, and try to retain customers and build a long-term ROI, and that leads to different behaviors. It is also, though, to be fair, it's different than the way you look at branding. I think when you do it right, you start to discover some of the relationships are different than messaging and changing people's ideas. It's more directly going into behavior. I think, Rachel was mentioning Barbie. I think, if branding is Barbie, loyalty's not even Ken. I think it's Alan. Ken's clothes fit him, but he's still a little different.
Yeah. You're probably going to hear a lot of this. At least I did yesterday. There might be more laughing than insights, but we'll see. I mean, there's definitely some nuggets in there. You just got to find.
In my defense, I was more drunk last night.
That's fair. Appreciate it. Hopefully not today. We'll see. Okay, so next question. I'd love to hear, we talked about what you think a loyalty program is supposed to do, or at least in your mind when you think of it. Are there examples of programs that you think do a great job with that today?
That it sounds like that's the most softball question ever, and it's always the toughest for me to answer because I know enough to know that when I look at a program, I don't know the economics behind it. I don't know why I received a certain message, and that really matters. It's very hard to tell the efficacy of a program, even though as marketers we think we look at something and how many people have used this phrase? You look at an ad, you look at a campaign, you say, that one really works. Well, how do we know? I mean, it's a pretty low bar to say I can intuitively say it works. When you look at the economics of something, I would say a loyalty program is working if it's retaining customers, it's moving them up, and it's changing their behavior. And I can't tell that from the outside. I can tell ones that as a consumer influence me. I flew here on JetBlue. I don't know that, maybe I could have saved $10 on Delta, but it was easier for me to do JetBlue, and I'm a JetBlue member.
Yeah.
Building up points that I don't use, like a lot of you. But I think some retailers, including, honestly, where I came from at Hannaford, the program there, I actually influenced myself, which is a weird experience shopping and buying more. I'm like, I don't need this. Damn it, I just got that. I need to. You reach this threshold for this coupon. So I think Hannaford in the supermarket arena has gotten a lot of acknowledgement and did a great job.
That's great. You talked about trying to change behavior there. Could you draw a connection to how you think about behavioral economics and just a little bit about your interest in that field and how that connects to the work that you do?
Yeah, so full disclaimer here, I'm an amateur. I used to think I was a very competent marketing person. Now I realize I'm just an amateur behavioral economist because we're both trying to do the same things. When we think, hey, I do this program, customers are going to do X, Y, Z, you're making a determination like a behavioral economist that you know which nudges make somebody change the trajectory they were on. As marketing people, though, it is let's just say it's a lower bar for the publication stats versus being a PhD in behavioral economics. So we tend to sometimes do that in a lighter way. But if you study behavioral economics at all, you realize that the models of behavior that we think we follow ourselves, not just our customers, but we think we behave in a certain way and we project that onto our customers. What we believe changes behavior and influences behavior is much, much more rational and calculating than what actually changes behavior. And I think the model that we use in marketing, and it does work at some macro level, is it matches more with branding. To say, I'm changing people's minds, I'm giving them awareness, doing something cognitive to them, and their decision-making changes. With something more immediate and more economics-based and more subtle, like loyalty, a lot of those models break down, and it's more you have to discover what's going to change the behavior of your customers that are in different situations, and you have to be open to it not making any sense whatsoever. So.
A lot of what you just said seems long-term in nature in the behavioral economics world, and similar to what you said about loyalty, but we all operate as marketers in this short-term mentality of it's got to drive an ROI, or we have to hit a quarter, or we have to hit whatever short-term objective is. How do you try and balance those two? You have an idea of what you're really trying to accomplish, but maybe forces are pushing on you to do something that's shorter term in nature. How do you reconcile those? And
first of all, I'd love to acknowledge the question and acknowledge that that's true. Like people, I don't know if anyone else here works in loyalty, but you work in loyalty and everyone wants a loyalty program and they hire you for a reason. And then they want you to look at everything in like a 1 week, retail's set up for Monday meetings. Everyone wants to know what happened over the weekend, but you want to retain customers long term. There's no evidence and there's no law of nature that says what works in the short term is what's going to retain people in the long term. It's probably related, but we don't know that for sure. So it is a tough balance because a lot of times to get budgets, you need to judge yourself versus other efforts. And those other efforts are generally short-term in nature, and they're producing a short-term ROI. So I tend to measure those, and I tend to report on them. am conscious of the efficiency, but I make sure I don't try to be so efficient on my campaigns that I take my eye off the ball of a long-term measure, with like holding out a long-term control and looking at the effects of an overall treatment.
That's great. I think that comes in so many different ways. I mean, I spent a lot of time selling into retailers, and a lot of that is trade promotion based. The same concepts apply there. It's exactly what you said. That Monday meeting, what was the sales lift? How much volume did we, frankly, just pull forward, by a week or so because someone just came in and you got that great big spike of sales, but maybe they would have purchased anyway. So it happens, and it happens in the ad world for us. A lot of times that pressure on, what is the immediate ROI on that campaign? What's happening with it?
Yeah, and I do think the pressure, putting on a little bit of an analytics hat there too, measurement, analytics, reporting. There's so much pressure that it changes behavior to come up with reasons why something fluctuated, and often we're looking at just fluctuation, and things will eventually settle on the mean. And we think something was up. It was because of the weather. I've sat in decent sized retailer's office with pretty sophisticated, smart people, and they're going around a room and looking at small little regions that are all adjacent to each other, and somebody is saying their sales were down versus last year because of the weather, and then the next person in line says their sales were up and it was because of the weather. and people make up stories, and then we all just everyone writes it down. You spend 2 hours and you walk away, and we don't question it because the narrative makes sense in our minds, but it's it's just regressing to the mean often. So
yeah, I think you're right, and we see that happening all the time. I touched on some similarities to advertising when I asked this question because it's the world that I live in. We're trying to do very similar things often. We're trying to keep a customer through advertising, get them to buy more, maybe recapture a lapsed customer. A little bit of difference is you're also trying to acquire customers in the advertising world, finding new people to bring in and you capture them in your loyalty program. One of the things that we hear all the time right now with something like the deprecation of cookies is, well, the solve is first-party data. You just use first-party data instead of cookies, except advertising, you're trying to acquire new customers often. So that there's a challenge with that approach. But I just wanted to get a sense from you. You've got loyalty, which is all about reaching people through your channels. That's probably mostly what you're doing. How closely are you connected in a loyalty world where you've got customer data and you understand what they're buying with your advertising counterparts who might have slightly different objectives? But how do you see those two pieces working together?
Interestingly, different marketing departments split up responsibilities differently, but I've mostly been separate from that external third party, separate as in it's not been directly under me. Having said that, savvy people eventually come to the conclusion that some of these silos are artificial and that there can be a continuum of how you reach people. So I think even calling a customer new versus rebuilding somebody, really it comes down to the definitions, and at some point the definitions might break down. So I think looking at all of these things and looking at an ecosystem of how to reach people and why you're doing it is more important, and it just depends on the situation. I came from one situation where my penetration in the marketplace was so great that nobody had data like I did. If I would call you up on the phone, I'd essentially indirectly be giving you my data so you can track a customer, so you can give it back to me so I can reach them in a different way that's less direct. However, now where I am, where we've done a fantastic job of growing a couple of segments in particular, one being lapsed, the other being we call gone. Those are our fastest growing customer segments right now. We want to win people back. Now I have their data, but there's a break in the data. Their buying habits may have changed, but also they might not be listening, might not be opening those emails. So now what I would need to do with those people, even though I have them at some level, I need to do something else. So that's where that marriage comes into play in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate that those are your fastest growing segments, but it also leads to very clear opportunity. You know what you need to do. So in some ways, that's probably helpful. And that might be, you hit on an interesting one of, they may not be responding to the channels that you used to be able to reach them through. Maybe an app, they don't open it anymore, or an email or an SMS. How do you think about that as you're trying to use your loyalty program and data? Do you use those same segments, or are you activating loyalty outside of your platforms in any other environment, or is that just like objective to market or to the advertising team?
I'm not currently doing that, but we've got plans to add the segmentations, which I think of as almost just creating a common language across platforms. So those segmentations will be working with Oracle, actually. I think going to be available so that we can do that all the way through. So if I define a customer as potential, let's just say, that's going to be the same definition everywhere, and we can have the same objective for them, and therefore all of the communications can be consistent.
That's a great point. Thank you for mentioning that. The need to unify data across all of those different areas so that you can utilize it and deploy it in the right ways. And I don't think we mentioned this, but part of your title, your remit, is loyalty, personalization, and analytics.
Yes.
If the data isn't being utilized in a consistent way for each of those, the analytics piece, it gets really hard to measure what's working and what's not. Because if if you're viewing someone as a lapsed buyer, and someone else is using a different data set and they say that's a new customer, you might think of them differently. I mean, either way, if you get them back, I'm sure you're happy, but it changes that perspective. Are they really new? Is it net new, or are you working, or is your other campaign, your recapture, working?
And every vendor, no offense, but and to half of you out here too, every vendor comes in and says, well, I can define your lap shoppers, I can define this, I can define that. And that's great that everyone can do that, but it serves the retailer better if we've got the same definition that persists, so that we can create goals and measure and then get better and better at doing whatever our goal is for them. If everyone defines it differently, and part of the challenge that the retailers are creating for themselves is if you silo different objectives and campaigns and efforts, even there could be a person that works on campaigns, and I see this all the time, even on my current team. You silo the campaigns, and there's no thought about how they complement each other or interact with each other, or it's superfluous one to the other. And that becomes a problem. But when you go across teams, it could be even worse. And I think having a segment and goals for segments, like if you are in this segment, you're engaged at this level, my goal is to get you to the next level, and keeping that consistent throughout.
Well, and only if you can keep that data to know which elements, that you can tie them all back to that segment and know which ones worked and which ones did not. May or may not.
The segment definition has to persist through all the pieces.
No, that's great. And do you think that is common today, or is that still a big area that needs to work, and at least in the programs you've seen?
I think the problem is common. And I think it's just because of human nature, because of the way we think in silos and think in discrete campaigns. I think it's tough for many people to think of something as a long-term treatment, and therefore a definition isn't necessary. You redefine. People think of segmentation as my targeting file, and I think segments can be more complex.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. It could be a component. You could take a piece of that segment and utilize it for a targeting file, but then you lose that.
But it's bigger than that.
Yeah, it's almost like that segment shouldn't be constantly dynamically updating. You need to keep it steady, or at least a portion for control measurement.
I like to say, and I've taught at the college level a little bit too, and I love to teach people that if you're doing segmentation right, you're not creating segments, you're discovering them. So there should be a reason that group is put together, and there's a potential there, and there's a reason why you want to define them and track them through time and do something.
That's great. So the time is an interesting one. We'll go back to that because it keeps coming through. Is it short term? Is it long term that we're trying to solve for? I don't think we need to or want to go deep in this part, but just earlier, standing at a table, we had an interesting conversation around AI, and if you're comfortable, we'll just touch on that. This notion of, again, short-term
I
campaign.
just recently found out it stands for artificial intelligence.
It does.
So
It does.
let's talk about that.
No, that's good. So we have an expert here on that topic. Maybe we'll at least just touch on the application of it, not how it actually works.
Good.
That's helpful.
So I can see the application of it being in loyalty, working with vendors like Symphony, EYC, Sagamartha, and dunnhumby, who are some of the leaders in personalization in the world, and they've got fantastic algorithms and leverage at the, back in the day they would call it machine learning, but it's evolved into actually artificial intelligence. Whether I'm conscious of it or not, I'm using artificial intelligence. We've had a conversation about how I don't just think, I know that some of what loyalty folks do and marketing folks do messes with the artificial intelligence and they don't realize it. So the artificial intelligence can work at a certain level to say, this is the right offer for that person at this time. And then we say, great, I know the right offer for the right person at the right time. And then when you develop campaigns, what do? We say, well, this offer's funded, so let's give it a few extra points so it goes up there more. And then, I got all this funding. Let's make sure that the funded offers are shown first. Let's, this offer's been underperforming. Let's tweak it on that. I really think that one should work. And it does a lot of other things. And even training your AI to say, I need the ROI in my short-term campaign to work because that's what I'm being judged on. Even that influences what is the AI solving for? Should we be solving for long-term? Should it be funding agnostic? Are your metrics valid? I think the humans are failing. I think we're going to get into a period where the AI is going to be fantastic, but it's not going to matter because we don't have the right humans training it and just managing it. So, myself included.
Yeah, because if you tell it to, you ask it one thing, but you tell it to do something else, you try and deploy it to do something else, then you're feeding it data on the wrong thing, and it might start delivering different objectives.
The lowest level example I can think of, and I've seen this in action, is we try to get the ROI in our campaigns up. So we influence it by saying, these offers are making me more money, do this. And not ignoring, but overriding or diluting might be the better word, diluting what the AI is saying the right offers are for the right people.
It's great. I think we are coming up on time, and I'd love to make sure, we've got a few more minutes. Okay, great. Where do we go next on this one?
Any other acronyms we can Google?
I'm sure we can find. I mean, I work in ad tech. We have that. We've got that dialed in. It is really helpful. If we want DMPs or CDPs or, we go all over the place.
I just feel like I want to sign something right now and buy it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I really appreciate. We're gonna just cut this one short. So, let's see. Another question here specific to loyalty. It was in your title there as well, personalization, and I think personalization is a really interesting topic because you've got some folks who will tell you do zero targeting, all mass market as much as possible. The only thing that matters is just putting a message out there, and others that everything is one-to-one personalization at scale, and that's achievable. Which end of the spectrum do you lean towards, and how do you think that should be utilized in those concepts together?
I think each of those strategies has its place. And I think they help each other. So I think there's a level of branding, there's a level of awareness where it's the same solution for most people, and you need to do that, get that efficiency of one message. In what I do, I'm mostly playing on the very far extreme. Like if I send out a campaign to 3 million people, it's very likely that no two are identical in the offers that they get, in the order that they see them, and everything else. There's an in-between as well, where going back to segmentation, there's, if you've got goals for a segment, your treatment for that segment may include one-to-one offers or even messages. The targeting engine doesn't care what you're showing them. you can have one-to-one offers, but you could have an offer that makes sense for people in that segment, what your goals are for that segment. So let's say a simple thing could be like a basket offer, like 5 off 50 or something like that. And even that could be personalized a little bit or change levels, maybe have 10 or 20 versions. But the one-to-one can have millions, potential to be billions.
In the digital world, because so much of that now, it's not, you're not printing. You're not creating a very specific piece of creative. It's offers. It's combinations of all of those offers.
And even with variable printing, you can still have a lot of variation.
Great.
Millions of variables.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating because I see brands struggle with making like 3 different ad creatives in the ad ecosystem. I mean, they'll tell you there's personalization, but they all look almost exactly the same compared to this world of just leveraging that data and having massive variation. And then how do you analyze that and really understand what's working?
Yeah, part of the answer is analyzing it at the treatment level. Like not looking just at every offer, but looking at, I know you got 6 offers through this targeting engine that should all be the most relevant for you. I got 6 offers, nothing's in common, but it's the treatment of finding the most relevant offers and what did we do in our behavior, and is it similar throughout the segment?
We have time for a few questions, and I think we've seen that both John and Tim are willing to be very honest, let us into their character,
as far as you know,
attributes, their flaws, what happens in the Monday morning meeting. So now's your chance. How about a couple of questions for them?
Thank you. Lori here. Thank you, guys. I have a question. I attended a training recently where they debunked a lot of common marketing assumptions, and one of them being the 80-20 rule. And they said that they had argued, in fact, that most of your sales don't come from your most loyal brand customers, but in fact, the highest frequent category buyers. So maybe in this case, it wouldn't be, Rite Aid, it would be those who frequent convenience, CVS, Walgreens quite often would be your most loyal, I guess, customers and where your most sales come from. Just curious to know your point of view and if you agree or disagree.
I think it probably varies by retailer and where they are in their journey, but I have seen patterns where you've got a lot of your sales come from your top customers, but how do you define the top? No matter how you define the top, there's still a big component of people that are transitory, occasional customers that if they all went away one day, you go out of business. So it's because there's so many of them. So they might have an eighth of the frequency and half the basket size, but they can eclipse your top customers by so many that they become very important. So you can't miss out on them. I go pretty deep into my segmentation. I like to say that if I have a boss that says, "Oh, look at the ROI you're getting. I need a better ROI," I could just say, "Tell me what ROI you want." I can just go down to fewer customers. But where the company is in its history, I need to go deeper into my list of customers and nurture them up. And I think it's similar to what you're saying, that the value of those customers as a whole is way bigger than what people think.
We have an interesting view on data because we look and have data that crosses many retailers that are aggregated across. So we don't just see heavy buyers at one, we see buyers across category, and we can go really deep across brands. So it's not just looking at one brand, but there's really interesting dynamics in that some of those concepts, and it is a little closer to 80-20 than I think what some of that research is showing when you can go both directions on that. What I've seen across most categories is that the concept of loyalty is often very driven by light category buyers who only buy once, which is a 100% loyal customer. The second you get to heavy buyers, like you buy 2 or 3 times at a particular brand, what you find is those are heavy category buyers and your loyalty's not that high. So anyone who is a heavy buyer tends to not be loyal. So there are definitely interesting dynamics there, and you have to peel back the onion and change your strategy on that.
Were you referring to a supermarket?
No, it was on a brand. I'm on the Dove brand.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and I've looked at this many times, and happy to talk more on that. It's for sure closer to 80-20 than what some of that is indicating. But it's right. It's on a category. You have to understand the category dynamics because those heavy buyers very rarely are going to be loyal.
Brian McGurk, Stingray Advertising. I had a question. Last week at CES, the CMO of Pfizer's talked about the focus on retail media networks and the reason being that really the substitution for the doctor's office and getting advice in the store. How much a part of your loyalty program is kind of creating that advisory role and getting people back that way?
At the moment, I can calculate that percentage pretty accurately because at the moment it's zero as part of my loyalty program. There are other efforts throughout the company. There's navigating the firewall between health information and just general information or loyalty there's some pitfalls, and we're fairly conservative and stay away from that. I'm trying to find where I can push the envelope and stay out of jail, unlike some of my ancestors or cousins, I don't know. But still take advantage of that because I think there is a need in the market for that. People want the information. And let's face it, the silos we create, even if they're legally driven, customers don't understand that. They're dealing with Rite Aid or CVS or Walgreens. They think you've got their information, you've got it everywhere. They don't understand a firewall. They don't understand why I can talk to you about this here but not here. So it would be great to get closer with that.
And there are some that can get closer by just improving technology, but there are some that are not going to change because that's either regulatory or it's a philosophy of a business that they won't do certain things. Which is different
if it's
than the
customer
technology.
driven, if the customer connects their pharmacy identity and their loyalty identity, then it opens up more. But you can't necessarily encourage it, and that's where again the behavioral economic come in. Take away the sludge, create the nudge, make it easier. So
Thank
we
you.
have time for one more, or
Is there one more over here? Yeah,
If it's a good one?
We'll squeeze it
Okay.
in.
Don't worry.
pressure's on now.
Exactly. Okay. My name is Mary. Thank you for taking the question. I'm speaking more to Rite Aid, but please chime in. What makes me curious is that in maybe 8 to 10,000 square feet, an average store, whatever it is, you have pharmacy, you have groceries, you have cosmetics, you have greeting cards, and so on. So with you in that position, I think it'd be very intriguing to understand where do you find the most predictive information that pushes to repeat business? Because I would think in the pharmacy, you could find out a lot about their problems and maybe suggest certain creams or whatever it might be, aspirin or whatever. And then with cosmetics, if you can get somebody there, we know that's just a home run. Yeah. I wonder if you could speak to that, please.
Probably not as much as you would like because of my recency, but I can tell you going across my experience, I can say from a loyalty perspective, it turns out that the best way to get people to shop more is, and even to expand their shopping, is finding what they are buying from you already. So if it is cosmetics or whatever, that's the into the other categories as well. So if you've got somebody who's buying one or two categories, it's hard to say because I'm approaching it from a different perspective. But I think some categories are stickier, but on an individual basis, which is what I try to get down to, the stickiest category is the one that they are buying from you in that respect. But I have to say, too, you can say our average store, but our stores, there's no such thing as average. We've got stores that are the size of a supermarket, and we've got stores that are tiny. Exactly. But we've done so many acquisitions over the decades that we've bought supermarkets. And then you've got just the same number of SKUs, and it really, really varies, and that adds some challenges as well.
Great session. Have a round of applause for the speakers and for the questions. Great questions.